big story of the day. 2 weeks after the trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schurr ended in a hung jury, Kent County prosecutor Chris Becker announced today he will not seek a retrial. Pretty much this means the case is just over in this aspect. Schurr was charged in the murder of Patrick Loyola after a traffic stop turned into a deadly shooting 3 years ago. Now, Becker says this decision was not one that was made lightly. Our Callie Lichter is live outside now from the Kent County Courthouse. Callie, you were in that press conference this morning when Becker made this announcement. He spoke for quite a while. Give us a breakdown of some of his big points today.
Yeah, Julia, we knew that this could be, an outcome of this case, of this trial. I mean, the jury came back hung twice, the last time ending in that mistrial, that dismissal. And so, Becker kind of touched on the points that all of us have been asking for the past 2 weeks. Something that stood out to me, he kept on reiterating that the jury was a perfect jury. They had a really big task that they needed to complete. They had to sit through, and he also said they were smart and they were on point with what both sides were saying. He also acknowledged, that he thought he brought the best case forward. And that was really point one on the reason why he's not going to, seek a retrial in this case. He said that he thought he put the best case forward. And if he were to do it again, he would do the same thing all over again, and it would end in a hung jury again. He said over the past 6 years, I believe they have come to 15 hung juries, and only one of those have been retried. So he said it's not even really a common thing to seek a retrial. And then really that second point again was the jury. He also talked about some, jury breakdown numbers. He said an initial split, it was 4 for guilty, 4 for not guilty, and then 4 who were just split. They didn't come to a decision. And then he said the second jury makeup, there was 7 for not guilty, 5 for guilty. And then the last, what we saw 2 weeks ago on that Thursday, he said it was 10 for not guilty and 2 for guilty. So he said that also really played into it. But again, he said he's not faulting the jury. He believed that this was an officer-involved shooting that should be decided by the people, that should be decided by a jury. So he says he's not faulting them. He just doesn't believe that, if he were to retry this case, he was going to get 12 people who all decided on one unanimous verdict, which is needed, in this type of case, Julia.
We've got a bit of what he had to say this morning. He spoke for, quite a while, just sort of breaking down the rationale that you were just summarizing. Let's take a listen into what he had to say. We are obviously having some technical difficulty. The prosecutor there, though, really kind of summarizing a lot of what you had to say, Callie. And I know another point that he made as well, and you may have touched on this a moment ago, but, he thinks that if we did do this again, if we did do a retrial, there wouldn't necessarily be a different outcome. That's what the clip that we were just going to play there would be. He said this is a very divisive community issue.
Yeah, that's right, Julia. He said, the community is split. He also talked to Patrick Loyola's father before, he made this announcement to the media in the press room today. And he said he knows that people on both sides are not going to be happy about what, that decision was announced today. He said he's been getting emails and calls and messages over the past 2 weeks from both sides, but people supporting, both for guilty, not guilty. And he said that didn't really play into his decision, though, or, didn't play in at all. He said he looked to the law, he looked to the facts, and he said when he looked at the law and the facts that, this was going to end in a hung jury, whether, he retried it or he just, stayed with that hung jury decision that we saw 2 weeks ago. Something else I thought was very interesting, Julia, is he also talked about the cost. Cost was kind of brought up, monetary cost was kind of brought up during the trial as well. People getting paid, experts getting paid, and Chris Becker was asked, how much did this trial cost, and did that play into, your decision to not to retry? And he said, no, when he's looking at a trial, he's not looking at the cost. Again, he's looking at the law, the facts, and the outcome that he can achieve by bringing a case to trial. And he said that, the experts that were brought in cost about, I believe it was somewhere between $60,000 to $70,000, something in that range. But he said, again, people calling in, people messaging in, the cause did not play into his decision to not retry this case, Julia.
And Callie, it seems pretty straightforward for us, because we've been so ingrained in this for several weeks. But at this point, can you explain, okay, the prosecutor has said he's not going to retry. This is it, ultimately. We do know, of course, there's a civil case, but walk me through sort of what is next legally for, any people involved in this situation.
Yeah, so when it comes to this specific criminal case, Christopher Schurr is a free man. It's kind of, an equivalent outcome to a not guilty verdict. He's basically acquitted. And there were some questions that were asked to Chris Becker during the press conference. Can Christopher Schurr get his job back at the Grand Rapids Police Department? And Chris Becker was like, I don't know. I don't have any hand in, GRPD functions, how that happens. I also, in my scope of things, I don't know if that would be an option, or even if, Schurr would even seek that out going to his former place of employment. That was a question that was asked. Another question that was asked is, does Chris Becker have any hand in changing and forming GRPD policy? Because that was also a really big thing brought up during trial, that foot pursuit policy, the taser policy, really at the core of what both sides were trying to get at, either one way or another. Chris Becker said he doesn't have a hand in that either. So really, again, when it comes to the criminal implications of this case, Christopher Schurr is a free man. Chris Becker did acknowledge that Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel could press charges against Christopher Schurr, but I do believe he said that she has never tried to press charges in a case like this after, a hung jury and the case was dismissed. So I don't believe we should be seeing that. He also said that Nessel has not reached out to his office either. But that is technically a possibility in all of this, but very highly unlikely, Julia.
And ultimately, what we are waiting for is the civil case, though, which of course doesn't involve criminal charges. That's why it's a civil case. That would more be surrounding the topic of, some sort of restitution. And we are ultimately, a totally separate case, but that should be coming up shortly, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that there's a lot of back and forth with that, and when it kind of gets to more civil matters, that's a whole different basket of eggs, than a criminal case. And so it takes a little bit longer when it comes to civil cases. In my opinion, it's a lot more paperwork and things on that end. And I do believe that civil case is on a use of force, Julia.
Callie, thanks so much. I really appreciate your expertise and your analysis. And of course, we know if and when, that civil case does come upon us, you will have us covered. So thank you so much for your time. And happening downtown, you could have sort of hear it where Callie was. There's a rally happening in that area, and that rally was being put on by the Grand Rapids Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Our Josh Albertus is there, but there's some speakers happening right now. We're going to listen into what they have to say. I'm going to stop talking and let you listen here for a moment.
You to continue to do that each and every single day, because at the end of the day, the quote that I leave you with is accountability or nothing. Thank you. Justice for Patrick! Justice for Patrick! Justice for Samuel! Justice for Samuel! Justice for Riley! Justice for Riley! Thank you, because if they have their way, there'll be justice for none of them. We cannot continue to let them have their way. It's not as simple as somebody saying, I fear for my life that the next 6 movements from an individual will take my life, and we're allowing people to kill unarmed people. Secondly, when they talk about the taser being such a deadly weapon that it puts an officer in enough fear to shoot somebody in the back of the head while they're on their hands and knees. If they're so dangerous, why are you so randomly using them on us? Right. If they're so dangerous, why is the scale for you to judge when you use them on us so low? You're not cooperating. So they pull them out, they use them until they can't even be used anymore. And when they can't be used anymore, they're still afraid for their lives. Forget what you're going through. You just can't come through the hood shooting people in the back of the head. I've said it before, if you shoot somebody in the back or in the back of the head, you are gonna have an uphill fight. You're not gonna have a fan club with some flags for you down the street. You're not gonna have people raise millions of dollars for you, hundreds of thousands of dollars for your defense. As we said growing up, when we heard the word justice, changed it into it's not justice, it's just us. When you see the jury pool for Kent County was even bigger than this trial, is to think of all the people and minorities that go through this situation that can never even have a fair trial. That people are on the jury that only know what they see on TV. I sat and watched the jury pool, and I heard many people say that basically one person ended up on the jury who said at first she didn't want to be on it. And they said, why? Because she said she believed in her mind, when the police tell you to do something, you need to do it. And basically, it led us to believe that she felt that if someone didn't do what the police said, that they were justified in doing what Patrick Leoya ended up being his demise, being shot in the back of the head. When you take the police training, you should understand, you're gonna come against people that are gonna be inebriated. You're gonna run into people who may have mental issues. You're gonna run into young people who have the fight or flight response. For those who take any psychology, and are you telling me if they take the flight response, you believe you had a right to shoot them in the back of the head? This is very important, because out of this courtroom, we're asking, what is the message that not only are you sending to the community in the greater Kent County area and citizens of Grand Rapids, Michigan, what message are you sending the police? The message I'm sending the police, same as the message that came out of the court. The message I'm sending them is that a bag is not a license to kill our brothers and sisters. A bag, not a license for you to take a life. I don't know if y'all have another microphone.
And you were just listening into a rally that's happening outside of the Kent County Courthouse in downtown Grand Rapids. You were actually just listening there to Kent County Commissioner Robert Womack. He's been very outspoken in this case. He was speaking to the crowd there. There appears to be a few dozen people at that rally holding signs, speaking out over a microphone. We do have a team there that is monitoring that rally, speaking to people about what prompted them to show up, and we will have more on that side of this story today, and really a full look at everything that happened with this big announcement in the case of former Grand Rapids officer Christopher Schurr tonight for you at 11 o'clock. So more coverage on that to come later this evening.